Prevention, Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force and Law and Justice Council meeting for February 23rd, 2026. I have Heather Flaherty, my co-chair, here in the conference room with me. Will be co-chairing this meeting as well. Let's start with the land acknowledgement, which I'll read now. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nuktak, Sanish, and Semiyama people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. And I will say that last week, our JPOP committee had an excellent panel. I encourage all of you to listen to it or watch it. And we'll be addressing that a little bit later in the agenda. Jill, would you scroll the agenda for us? Let's see, before I hand it over to Heather for the next item, I want to introduce member Rob Sullivan. Rob, would you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? It's good to have you here.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Rob Sullivan. I'm the Regional Director for Pioneer Human Services over Whatcom Detox in Itua and Oak Harbor. I've been in behavioral health for 37 years now, which makes me rather old. But I'll have to get over that. I'm part of the JPOP committee and very excited, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for your service to our Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force. And Heather?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. The first item on the agenda today is the appointment of IPRTF co-chairs, actually the second item. And I'd love to open this up to if we want to create a space. If there is anyone here who would like to raise your hand to be a co-chair, you are welcome to do that. Right now, the slate is myself, Heather Flaherty, and Peter Frazier up for reappointment and affirmation of co-chair position, but it's also fair to open up for any nominations or anyone else who would like to volunteer for that position. So I'll pause for 40 seconds or so in case anyone wants to think about that.
Oh,
Sheriff Tank.
Excellent.
Are you volunteering to be co-chair?
Absolutely not, because I think you're doing a good job.
Okay.
My question is, although you are the current co-chairs, does there need to be, if no one comes forward, does there need to be a nomination for you to keep those positions?
I think that's probably the most formal and technically correct procedure. So if anyone would like to entertain that motion to nominate Peter Frazier and Heather Flaherty as co-chairs of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force.
So
we would. Okay, so moved. And go ahead, Bertie. Do you have something? You're muted. We can't hear you, Bertie. Are you volunteering? Okay.
I was trying to second it.
Oh, thanks, Bertie. Thank you. Thank you. Before we take the full vote, though, I do want to just say that this position is, I think, quite an honor. And Peter and I will not be on the task force forever. And so if you have any interest, or if you know of anyone who has interest, I do think that really thinking about that bench of leadership is really important. And so please consider that. And so before, I guess now we can vote,
We can
right?
vote. And my understanding from Jill is you have to actually raise your hand, physical hand, turn on your camera, raise your hand, because a virtual hand does not get recorded. Correct, Jill?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay, so nomination of Heather Flaherty and Peter Fraser as co-chairs of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. All in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And any abstentions for the record?
I'm not
Okay.
seeing very many hands raised in favor. Can we do that again, please?
All in favor, raise your hand.
Please raise your hand if you're in favor, if you're voting in favor. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. I see all hands raised.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the confidence in our leadership. So here we go.
Committee membership. Jill, would you put this up on the screen? This was in your packet. It is the membership of each of our committees. Look for your name there. Make sure that this is correct. And if you have any changes, please raise your hand. Otherwise, this will be the makeup of our committees. And while you're looking for your name and such, I'll just say how much I appreciate the work that each of you do. I know how many hours go into these meetings and prep for the meetings and such. And I thank you, one citizen to another, or staff member and citizen.
I would just
All
say,
right.
if anyone wants to contact me after the meeting, feel free to give me a call or send me an email if you want to change or add your membership on these committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
Bertie, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just want to make a quick comment about the index committee, which is at the top. The next meeting has been canceled, and I'm waiting to see what comes of another item on the agenda, which is a data coordination work group. And so for those of you who might be interested in involvement in planning for how we roll out data collection, etc., I encourage you to think about it, and we will be revisiting the role of index committee once there's been more action in these other areas. So just keep us in mind.
Thank you very much, Bertie. Okay, so we have some presenters today on our jail planning scenarios. I'm wondering, would Kayla or Jed, would you like to kick this off? Your memo that came to us is not in the packet, but the one that you sent to Jaw and to Fab. And I just wondered whether there's anything you wanted to say kind of to tee this presentation off.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Jed, unless you'd like to. Nope. Okay, great. Yeah, so I think folks probably read in the paper and have been hearing from different channels that we're in a really important phase of the jail project as we move towards making some decisions around scope and budget. The executive has set the goal that we have a decision by the end of April to keep the project on schedule. And we are working with the Finance and Facility Advisory Board to hopefully get some interim direction even between now and April so our teams can continue to keep working. You'll hear today from our project manager, Adam Johnson at STV, and he's going to give a similar, if not the same presentation he gave to the Finance and Facility Advisory Board on February 12th. The Finance and Facility Advisory Board is sort of the main advisory board charged with providing project direction here, but we want to also make sure that IPRTF has a full view on the information being presented there, as this really is the window for public input on scope and budget. So with that, I will kick it over to Adam. And we can certainly have more discussion and Q&A after his presentation.
We'll
Thank
have
you.
plenty of time for Q&A.
I'm sure there will be at least one question. There we go. All right, sharing my screen. Hopefully you all can see that. I'm getting at least one nod. Okay, good.
Yes, we can. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So, for those that don't know, I think I've been here a few times, so hopefully you remember my face. But yeah, once again, Adam Johnson, project director with STV. This is the presentation that we gave to both Jaw and Fab. We gave a condensed version to the small cities last week as well. Really updating on where we're at in the project. Again, some of the decisions that or some of the information that we're preparing in order for folks to make recommendations and decisions coming, in the coming months here. Just a few things before we sort of dive into what we're going to be talking about to level set, because it's been a little while since I've been here. Once again, we're in the validation stage of the project, so we're not into design yet. So we're not designing anything. We are in the programming and validation stage. So we're really trying to figure out what's in and out of this project in sort of a program level, trying to figure out things on a square footage basis. And so when we see things like what may look like a design, it's important to understand that we're really putting things on white paper in a white room. We haven't designed on a site yet. This is really a programming exercise. So we're not thinking about adjacencies and those types of things yet. We're really working towards square footage numbers, trying to come up with budget numbers, those types of things. We will take whatever comes out of this and then sort of design later. And so we also are working with conceptual estimating numbers at this point. So to talk a little bit about our work and what we've done at this point, we really started with two bookends in our scenarios here. And the first one was a scenario one. And that was to really work within a budget. And that scenario work started with that budget of $170 million. And one of the targets that we tasked our design build team with was, hey, we need to come up with some benchmarks. Let's figure out a cost per square foot, those types of things. And we utilized the Skagit County Jail, having been done somewhat recently, and a neighbor right to the south there, along with some other jails as well, and use that as a sort of benchmark there. We're also using 480 beds through each of the scenarios that you see. That's based on that jail capacity analysis that was complete last year, so that we're keeping apples to apples throughout the different scenarios. And so scenario one was really backing into that budget and the 480 beds. Those are the big drivers there. So figuring out how many square feet we can get based on that cost and those beds. So housing was really prioritized first with that. And pretty much everything else was trying to squeeze into that based on budget. At the other bookend was really scenario four. That was taking into things like implementation plan, visioning sessions, et cetera, and getting more of a scope-driven scenario, and then figuring out how much that would cost. And then scenario two was expanding upon scenario one. Scenario three builds upon scenario two. And you'll see what these things look like in just a moment here. Nope, I'm going the wrong way. So now we're going to look at some numbers pretty early on a Monday morning to be looking at abstract numbers, I know. But these are the square footage numbers that we started to come up with as we looked at these scenarios. So first thing on the left is that Skagit Jail. So Skagit was built with 400 beds. And like I said before, so we're looking at all these scenarios at 480 beds. So if you were to take the square feet per area for the Skagit jail and take that jail and scale it up to a 480 bed jail, that's the square feet that you would end up at. So if we're trying to compare apples to apples, that would be something that it would look like. So that scenario one represents, again, backing into that $170 million budget, and again, all four scenarios have 480 beds. What you see on that far right is a number that starts with a three, over $300 million for the jail project costs. So what we quickly realized was that was completely unaffordable when it comes to what the sales tax measure would be able to afford. We did basically no more work on that when we realized it was out of price range. We also quickly realized that scenario one was completely inadequate for a number of reasons when we started looking at what the square footage represented. So when we're talking about why square footage matters, it's because when we think about, things like services, programs, etc., all of those things take a physical place for them to occur in. They don't happen just sort of in the ether, right? So I'm not going to go through this line by line, but if you look at something like scenario one, and we look at the square footage there. So the administration space in scenario one, because we had to back into that number, we're only able to get 3,000 or so square feet of administration space in there. Well, that's not enough for the current jail administration staff. So that's what I mean when I say it's inadequate. It only has 500 square feet of warehouse space. Well, the current work center has about 5,000 square feet of warehouse space. So again, it's inadequate. So that's what I mean when I say that scenario one wasn't really cutting mustard. The court space, 3,000 square feet. That's only one courtroom. And that's what we have now, or what Whatcom County has now. And we heard time and time again from Superior Court, District Court, Municipal Court is that having that one courtroom for things like first appearances and bail hearings, etc., is creating a bottleneck, right? So that's not an improvement. That's more of the same, and that's creating, like I said, a bottleneck and keeping people there longer and delaying people from getting through the judicial system. So then what happened was we saw that scenario one was lacking. So we worked with the sheriff's office staff and basically did what was a bare minimum to raise the floor, if you will, in a scenario two to get those minimums and more of a functioning jail. So you see the administration increased by about double. That's to accommodate the current jail staff. If you look at something like the warehouse, that's enough to accommodate the warehouse needs. The courtroom space more than doubled. So in scenario two, now there's two courtrooms, two physical courtrooms, and two virtual courtrooms. So that's much more ample, and there's also room for visitation, things like that, to professional visitation, things like that. You'll probably notice that in scenario one, there's 7,500 square feet dedicated to programs, and only 230 square feet dedicated to program space in scenario two and three, which seems like a little bit of an outlier. And I haven't talked about housing yet. And that's the main driver in all of this, right? So in scenario one, housing is very different from housing in scenario two and three and four. And that's what's driving the square footage differences. So in scenario one, we have no program space or rec yard space in where the housing is. It's all decentralized. So it's away from where everybody is, much like it is in Skagit. So if you've toured Skagit, it's much like that. It's all on a different wing. Even the rec yard space is separate from where everybody is. Scenario 2 and 3, all of that's incorporated into where the inmates are. So that program space, the rec yard space, et cetera, is incorporated back into where the housing is.
Adam, would you hold on for one moment?
Sure.
Maya, do you have a
Thanks.
question?
Sorry, I just didn't want to leave this slide when I have questions about this. And I maybe you're not. You said programs, you identified it as an outlier, but didn't explain what is that cutting? I mean, what you showed us the numbers, but what does that mean?
So the program space itself in scenario 1 is separate. So it's in a separate wing somewhere. So things like classroom space, visitation space, any sort of mental health space, etc., even the rec yard space. It's all in a separate wing, much like it is at Skagit in scenario 1. In scenario 2, that's in where the inmates are located. And we can look at what something like that. I can pull up some drawings or diagrams in a moment so you can kind of see what that looks like in a moment. So the physical space itself.
So even in the better or more luxurious scenarios, there's far less programming space?
No, the space itself is allocated into where the housing is.
Okay.
More like the Franklin County model that we saw in Ohio.
So instead of
so-
it being a separate space, it's allocated back into where the housing is.
When you look at scenario 4 that lists 3640, is that per unit or I
It's
guess
both. So there's more. So it's grown. There's space within the housing units and outside of the housing units as well.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When I did hear someone say that in all scenarios, kitchen and laundry are not on site or something like that. Is that accurate?
Nope, that's not accurate at all. Kitchen and laundry is on site for all of these scenarios.
Adam, I'm not sure if you'll cover this moving forward, but I also am wondering about the 480 rated beds number and why that is not being, like, I'd like to bring that up for discussion. Why are all the scenarios based on 480 beds?
Or another way to ask, I think that I'm looking at is like, how many beds can we afford at scenario 4, which is what, the visioning and all of those, like how many beds can we get at scenario 4? Have you guys figured that out?
Not at this juncture.
Yeah,
I'm feeling
can I
like
chime in real quick?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
and then I'm going to let Adam answer sort of portions of the question that I think he's ready to. So the project team needed one fixed variable in order to scope the scenarios. There was sort of a general impression after that initial jail capacity analysis that 480 beds was a good starting place for discussion. It was sort of consistent with the earlier ranges we had discussed prior to the jail ballot initiative, and also was sort of the most, the number coming out of the most comprehensive study we had at that time. The project team is doing sort of refinement of the jail capacity analysis now, which this group's going to see, and Adam can talk about a little bit. The 480 number is not a set decision at this point, but a starting place for the scenarios and discussions. The team is able to scope additional scenarios, but scoping scenarios is it's an exercise. It costs money from our designers and stuff like that. And so we really need direction from the Finance and Facility Advisory Board if they would like us to scope additional scenarios and sort of which levers they want to see us pull in those scenarios, whether that's beds, budget, programming space. And so that would be sort of my recommendation is we need sort of some consensus if we're going to spend a lot of time and money looking at additional scenarios. For instance, what Maya suggested around like, okay, well, if we had a level 4, a scenario 4 level of service, and we took that as the given, then what does that look like from a bed count standpoint?
I guess when we were on slide 2, we heard that it was quickly realized that scenario 4 was not affordable with 480 beds. And I'm wondering, when was that realization? What does that mean that it was quickly realized? Like, was that realized?
When the price tag was over, when we started looking at the price tag of about 350 million.
Yeah, when was that realized?
What do you mean, Maya?
Like
I
at what
guess
meeting?
I guess I'm like, there's this pressure to April with an April date of decision making, but concern about additional thought and mapping going into it. So I'm trying to understand the time frame. Like,
So the executive's office, our facilities team was presented sort of over the last couple of months with initial numbers around some of these scenarios without the level of detail that Adam's providing here. We and sort of in stages. The original budget for this project was $155 million. So looking at something north of $320 million was very outside of the budget, unaffordable, even if the entire 0.2% sales tax was devoted towards this project. We have an interlocal agreement with the cities that allows for retention of money by the cities after a certain date with some flexibility. And we have a commitment to the community to also prioritize sort of community-based services in addition to the jail. Like as stated in my memo, under no sort of even the most optimistic scenarios around all of those levers, a budget north of $300 million is not attainable for Whatcom County.
I'm feeling that we should let Adam finish his presentation and hold your questions if you would. These are all great questions and we definitely want to get to them. But Adam, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. So just real quick on this slide, if we look at the difference in square footage on housing, just keep that in mind that we go from 66,000 in scenario 1 to 120,000 in scenario 4. It's almost doubling the square footage in housing. But again, keeping just 480 beds consistent throughout. And so we're going to look at housing. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me go forward. We're going to look at housing next. So this is scenario 1's housing. So as you can see, this is pretty bare bones. And I know it's probably a little hard to see on your screen there, but it really is just housing in here. There's no program space. There are 2 of the 64-bed dorm style bunks. That's these here. And so what you see here, these white rectangles, these are dorm style housing units. We're just showing the lower levels here. There's a mezzanine above that basically duplicates with housing above here. So there's no doors on these units. These are just open dorms. So there's 48 bed units, 64 bed units. There's 2 of the 64 bed double cell units. So there's only 2 of these with that give you the doors. Again, no program space or rec yard space in where the housing units are. Each one of the scenarios does have this 32 bed single cell unit, and that is for a medical wing. The issues that you have with a scenario like this is that it can be difficult to fit 64 people in a unit like this that all get along. Classification becomes more difficult in these types of units where everybody is open to one another and you have large units like this. Separating male and female populations can become difficult when you have large units like this. Sorry, that's my dog. Medium, min, max security, all the classification that you have just becomes more difficult when you have these large units like this, especially when they're set up like this. But they're efficient from a square footage perspective. And so that's where I end up with a 66,200 square feet or so. Oops, I'm sorry, going the wrong way. In scenario 2, there is some shared rec yard space in between the two. So you would get a couple of units, you would share rec yard space between the two, so the rec yard space is there. With all these setups, you could do a hybrid, so you could do direct or indirect supervision. You can see this little square right here. That would allow, that would allow for direct supervision. There's other ways to do indirect supervision as well. The layout here just doesn't show it. There is, some visitation allowed in here, a very small amount of visitation and or like a classroom space that we're still working on trying to figure out how we get it in here. But these are all 64 bed double bunked units, which again poses some difficulties in both classification as well as, if they're all bunked units, then, anybody with mobility issues can't get up on that second bunk. And they're all these very large units, which again poses challenges for classification and those types of things. It expands your square footage by a little bit as well. Scenario 3, and again, this is just programming, not necessarily a design. But scenario 3 introduces, a mix of housing. So you would have some dorms, some of the double bed bunked, and then you would introduce some single cell units as well. So those single cell units provide a lot more flexibility with classification, being able to house folks that can't be housed with other folks, whether for security purposes or just predator prey situations or behavioral health issues, what have you. So introducing these 16-bed single cell units gives you a lot more flexibility as far as that's concerned. Again, the 32-bed medical unit, this is just a different type of, possible design where you're splitting folks up into sub-day rooms. So you have, 4 sub-day rooms of 8 people with, sort of a central watch here. The shared rec space, I know it's hard to see here, but it looks like classroom almost. You would have this like shared classroom space in between the units that was accessible. So that's where that program space is. So that's where that's being incorporated in here. Whereas in scenario 1, anything that looks like that would be on a different wing, much like it is in Skagit. And again, if you've been to Skagit, you know that wing doesn't ever get used because they don't have the staff to take people there. So in that scenario 1, where you're moving people to a different wing to access program space or access rec yard space, it's very staff intensive. It's because you're having to move people for professional visitation, for personal visitation, for program space, for rec space, for anything that takes place outside of a cell. You're having to transport people for all of that. And these types of scenarios where the rec yard space or program space visitation is where the inmates are housed, then you're bringing those types of services to where people are already located. And so your transport needs to go down quite a bit. And your safety factor decreases too. You're just less risk. Sorry. Scenario 4, just another mix of types of units, but again, that grows your square footage quite a bit. So you have 64 beds of the double flats. So instead of the bunks, you know, have two beds that are on flat next to each other. So that eliminates any sort of mobility issues for people getting up on a second a double bunk. It also allows you to bunk in the future, so future flexibility is a little bit higher there. You have the 48 bed double cells, the 24 bed single cells, and again, the 32 bed single cell for medical unit. So this is just a type of mix that would give you a lot more flexibility in terms of classification, as well as some future flexibility as well. But again, that doubles your square footage from scenario 1 to scenario 4. Part of our work was benchmarking cost per square foot. So, you know, we were looking at Skagit escalated to 2025, looking at, you know, everything in 2025 dollars because that's when a lot of this was done. So we came up with the 875 cost per square foot, again in 2025 dollars. If you're looking at what all goes into that, there's the construction costs. Because we're working with the Bounty site, we have the off-site wetland work, professional services costs. So that's design fees, things like that, the sales tax. So escalation out to midpoint of construction. So again, if we're working with 2025 dollars, we still have to escalate those construction dollars out to, you know, our anticipated midpoint of construction. There's a lot of contingency baked in there because, again, we're working at a program level estimate right now. We still have to put things on a site and proceed with design. So there is a lot of contingency baked in, but that's an appropriate level of contingency given where we're at in the project right now. And then you see we still have the behavioral care center and the demolition of the existing jail. A quick note on the behavioral care center. This is just assuming a 40,000 square foot behavioral care center. It's really just a plug number right now. A lot of the work on the BCC is paused right now until we get the behavioral health analysis complete, which we're getting a draft report at the end of next week already. Oh my gosh, it's February 23rd already. Yeah, so we're going to get a draft report on the behavioral health analysis at the end of next week, and then a couple of weeks after that, the design builder will have a look at that and start some programming efforts onto that, so that number will become a little bit more refined. At least we do know where we're going to be building it, and so a little bit of work is, you know, going into site, things like that. But until we get a little bit more analysis and programming done with that, this is, you know, a plug number based on some square footage. So this number is very likely to change as well. So when we're looking at these different scenarios, you know, there's a lot of, you know, priorities that obviously are going into this facility. And there are decisions that have to be made around some of those priorities. I do want to stress that when we're talking about these different scenarios, they're not sort of all or nothing. That there are, like Kayla was talking about, different levers to pull on these things. So one of the reasons that we wanted to do 480 beds across the board is because we need to fix some of these variables, or I need to have the more variables that we can have fixed, the better. If we had cost was an unknown and number of beds were an unknown, we really would have been spinning our wheels and had 72 different scenarios, right? And it's not very productive or a good use of county's time or money for us to do that. So we have to fix as many of the variables as we can. We can start to fix cost, which it sounds like we're getting a direction around cost. We can start to fix cost and then pull some of these levers as well. The more knowns that we can have, we can be a little bit more certain around what we can fit and what we can't fit into some of these different scenarios as we go forward. But we had to start somewhere. And given that we had a jail capacity analysis at the time saying 480 beds, we wanted to start there. I think I'm going to pause here. If you look at the top, you see again 480 beds. We have a approximate budget number across the top. Again, that's the cost of the jail, doesn't include the BCC, doesn't include the cost of the demo of the existing jail. And we can talk a little bit more about what some of these things mean and open it up for questions, I think.
Adam, are you saying you'd like to open it up for questions now?
I think that's
Okay.
a great idea, given our
Okay.
time.
I see Arlene there. Go ahead, Arlene. What and everybody else, get your questions and thoughts together, and we'll approach them. Arlene, go ahead.
I would like to say that it's important for this information to be conveyed to every member of this group to be able to spend the time to really look at it and understand it. So I would like to ask Adam to get that information out to the members. I want to speak on behalf of behavioral health. When it comes to that, which is quite different from jail in terms of its needs, we need excellent staff and well-paid staff and experienced staff for mental health. But the site and the building is less important. In this city of Los Angeles, we have free clinics. They were in very poor environments, but the staff was good. And so people were helped psychologically. So that's quite different from the jail. It's not necessary to have a great plant, a great site. It's preferable, but it's not necessary. So when you're making decisions, remember that that's quite different than the jail, the space for mental health. Thank you.
Arlene. Maya, please go ahead.
Thanks. I guess my question is, if this doesn't include any funding for BCC or the demo of the current jail, is there alternate separate funding for the BCC? Is it that none of these scenarios would allow for the separate BCC? And then I have a second question that's different, so I'll let you address that one.
Adam, do you want me to try that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Maya, what we communicated to the FAB the other day is that unless directed otherwise, we're moving the behavioral care center forward concurrently. We're estimating at the high end $30 million for that facility and hoping around 14 comes from the state. So what we're doing is adding $10 to $15 million to the numbers you see here. It's trying to incorporate behavioral care center costs. As it relates to the demo of the existing jail, we have a placeholder figure that Adam can share, but we're becoming more pessimistic about our ability to accomplish that within this project.
Okay, thank you. And I wasn't really able to interpret the drawings very well. And in which scenarios is there direct access for visitation to the housing units?
Yeah, definitely sorry, let me go back. So definitely in scenario 4. So we have, like a multi-purpose room here. There is, let me see. There's area for visitation. Let me see. I think it's on one of the drawings. Oh boy, you're not gonna be able to see it very well. There would be area for visitation in scenario 3 and 4 for sure. Scenario 2, we're still working on like how that might work. And so a little bit more work has to be done in that, but definitely in scenario 3 and 4.
Can you go back to 2 for a second? It looked like there's a room labeled interview multi-purpose maybe
Yeah.
along that corridor. I don't know.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Like, I can't actually read it.
Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up on my other
But
screen
would
and
that
zoom
be
in.
so there is access interview
Yeah. Yeah,
meeting
that is the
scenario
intention.
2?
Yeah.
Okay.
So with respect to, because public defenders in particular, we have heard the complaints about Skagit quite a bit. And so we really want to make sure that so for those that don't know, at Skagit right now, they had built both holding and professional visitation right next to where the court is. And all of the professional visitation gets taken up by holding because they didn't build enough holding for professional visitation. And so a lot of the times, defense attorneys cannot meet with their clients. And so, our intention is to build a lot of the professional visitation that's needed, either, preferably at housing, and if not, build enough both holding area and professional visitation near where the court is.
Yeah, if I could chime in briefly, these are just conceptual drawings, they're not designs. And so getting a closer look at those models, you're not going to see actually a design of how it's going to be laid out. It's just putting all those concepts on the same piece of paper.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was an allocation of space for that on scenario 2 because I can't read it. Okay, I guess circling back to my question of making a determination of how many beds can we afford if we are using scenario 4, is that an analysis that is going to be done? And if so, how long does it take to do those calculations? And when could we know that?
So our work ahead of us over the next several weeks is to, we've had further budget direction, and so now is our opportunity to figure out what we can, I guess, squeeze into that budget, and figure out the different types of housing scenarios that might fit into that budget. And if it's less beds, with better amenities, there's also, looking at things like if we have less beds but higher utilization rates, things like that. So I have a meeting later this afternoon with the design build team. So we have a series of meetings this week and next, where we're going to try to answer some of those questions and start looking at that.
I see that Rosa, did you have a question? Did you want to?
Yeah.
Now?
I'm not okay. I'm gonna ask a question. I'm not sure if this was addressed already, but I may have missed it. But have like corrections officers have any input or any thoughts about this? And I guess my other, so I always speak about this. I've been in that system, and I think I don't see anything where the big red button is the emergency button to have the staff come into the room. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Like if there's an emergency, like an inmate would go push it. Because in the jail right now, it's like in the very front.
Yeah, we're not there yet. That comes in design and we're in programming. So
okay.
Yeah, that's way down the line. And yes,
that's way down the line.
Yep.
Well,
jail staff are involved right now. Yes.
All right. I guess I might talk about it later or whatever. But I guess my only thing about that is, unless you've been in there, so say you see or you experience something, and that button is in the front where everyone can see you, you're most likely not going to go push that button because now you are a target, regardless of what you're pushing it for. So yeah. So whenever we get to that time, I'll talk about that more. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Really appreciate that. Deborah?
Hi, good morning.
And then, Deborah, after you, we're going to go to Heather and then to Bertie.
Okay, great. Full disclosure, jail design is a completely new thing for me, but I did meet with Madam last week, and I do have a couple of questions. One is about staffing costs. So as the facility gets larger and we offer more programming and different things like that, the staffing costs will also go up. Is that correct?
So we are evaluating staffing costs as part of our exercise. We're going to be doing so at a high level, basically the number of FTEs as far as uniformed officers, things like that. As we get farther and farther into design, we're going to be able to think, more clearly about what those long-term operating costs are going to be. Again, we're at the programmatic level, so we're going to be able to do this at a high-level analysis. But we are starting to think about that, where we think about, these different sorts of layouts, and the number of staff that it would take to supervise, these different number of units or number of, those types of things. That's a huge factor. More than 80% of your long-term costs are going to be, staffing. And so it's a big factor.
Okay.
And we're also comparing that to what's there now. What we have now is also not very, I'm sorry, what you have there now is not very efficient because you're running two facilities. There's the downtown facility and the work center. And there's a lot of duplication of effort in between those two. And so factoring that in as well, we're going to try to do some analysis on that as well, and sort of compare and contrast, current state versus future state. And we've got a couple of weeks to do that all. And so we're gonna do our best. But yeah, we have charged our design build team and ourselves with looking at, as much as we can, what are the operating costs of this new facility going to be? Because it's the major cost of a facility like this. I know we're all looking at $200 million is like, oh my God, how much money is that? But the operational costs of this thing over 50 years, a lot more than that. When you start to look at, staffing and maintenance and all the other costs that go into a long-term capital facility like this.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, for your question. Heather?
Yeah.
Oh, Deborah, did you have another question? You said you had a couple.
I actually do, and it's more, I'll just throw it out there. Adam, we also spoke a little bit about this. You caught my ear when you said a double flat could actually provide some flexibility. When you said that, are you implying that perhaps you could make them a quad? So you could have two bunks in there, so there would be flexibility if we had a lot of ebbs and flows in the capacity or in demand of the jail for rooms
It's
like that?
possible depending on the size. Like you probably wouldn't want to do that in a 64 bed unit because then you have 128 people in there. So I don't think Sheriff would like me saying, yes, we're going to build 128 bed units. But if it was a smaller unit that we did that with, then yeah, there is some flexibility with that. And you could do some of the cells like in a 48 bed, there's probably some opportunity to do some of that with. But so it would depend on the total size of the unit and the number of cells in there. So there is some flexibility depending on the size of the unit. But yeah, you wouldn't want to do that with like a 64 bed unit because that would be unmanageable at some point, probably.
Right. So it would be kind of a strategic,
Yeah.
an overflow situation where you could add beds in
Yeah.
certain. Okay.
Yeah.
And because I heard also at the meeting last week that that the original request is around 600 beds. So we're running the analysis on 480. So just kind of thinking about how to build in flexibility long term for a facility that's gonna, you probably want a useful life of 50, 60 years, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Heather Flaherty here, and I would like to share some things just for the public record for when we reference back to this meeting. For a decade, Whatcom County has been working to build a justice system that actually prevents and treats and reduces incarceration, hence the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. Adam, I'm not sure if you're aware of, in 2019, the county council reaffirmed for the county the principles of public health, safety, and justice facility planning. So this is the system that we wanted to design. It's a wonderful document. Thank you, County Council. I want to share a couple of excerpts from this for the record, because I think it's important to go back to what was the intention and the design of everything. This document, it's part of the County Council website. You can look it up. Talks about the listening tour that County Council went on after the first two failed jail votes in 2015 and 2017. And it says, during that tour, many participants agreed that there needs to be a public safety and justice facility for people who are violent and at risk of harming others, and that the facility needs to be a safe and humane place for the corrections staff and those individuals who are housed there. People have also voiced that it's critical to prioritize treatment over punishment. We also heard strong support for a smaller jail located in downtown Bellingham. Therefore, in order to guide the public process and county administrative plans and actions in the future, we do hereby put forward the following set of incarceration prevention and reduction, criminal justice, behavioral health, and public safety and justice facility planning principles for our communities. I'm going to read just a couple of those principles. Number 2 is the following are inextricably linked: responsible stewardship of public funds, ensuring public safety, and providing adequate countywide behavioral health services. And number 4, we will continue to commit funding towards community-based preventive services. We need post-release support to maximize successful reentry and minimize recidivism. These actions now can hold down recurring criminal justice costs in the future. And number 7, the size of jail facilities should be based on a comprehensive analysis of treatment, diversion, and local criminal justice policies and the requirements of law. While accurate measures of current incarceration rates adjusted for future population growth are important, we must also equally consider national, state, and local trends towards improvements in prevention, alternatives, behavioral health, and reentry support. So starting with those principles, then looking at, I'd just like to really underline Maya's request for what number of beds could we afford under scenario 4. And I think taking the time to do that math and understand that is well worth it when we're looking at a $300 million capital expense for the county. Just some data too for the record. I know that one of the constraints that people are feeling is that booking restrictions in the interlocal, that there can be no booking restrictions day one based on the interlocal contracts with the cities, right? And we don't want to reopen those. But for the record, let's talk about bookings per city. The county itself, the Sheriff's Department, in 2024 had 1,211 bookings. The city of Bellingham had 1,780. Ferndale had 142. Sumas had 14. Lummi had 236. Linden had 110 bookings. Nooksack had 5 bookings. Blaine had 114 bookings, and Everson had 40. So when we're talking about booking restrictions, I think we're really talking about the city of Bellingham, right? And what their arrest and booking restrictions are. I looked at that jail capacity analysis, that the draft that was shared with finance last summer, I think. And at that time, the average of my question then is, how many people are not booked that otherwise would be, right? How do we get rid of booking restrictions to honor that? The analysis was it's on average about 15 per week. So over the last decade in Whatcom County, our average daily population in our jail has been about 300. So let's add 315 to 300, 315. And then we also know that we want the jail to be operating at an 85% capacity. So if you add that 15% capacity, that number becomes about 370. A couple of other numbers that I think are important are that the best math I can do for how much it costs per jail bed for operations, is looking at the county budget, which currently is about $21 million just for the jail operations, I understand, if I'm reading that right. However, for all of the justice and law budget, just for the record, 55.3% of the county's general fund is spent on this system. So $70,000 per bed is like, if we can really keep costs down, which I don't know that that's really in the long run. If we're going to include treatment, that might need to go up, right? That's reasonable. And in fact, national standards show it's like $120,000 per bed. But even so, at that rate, if we build 480 beds, that would be, I think, $33.6 million a year for operating the jail. And over 50 years, as you mentioned, that's about $1.7 billion of operating costs, right? So I think these numbers are at a magnitude that it is important for us to really be thoughtful about the overall values going into the project before we get to, I think, obviously the design details. And so I would love, and the other thing is at that finance meeting, one of your teammates, Adam, said, whatever you build, you will fill it. And I think that is a really good admonition for us to think about what are those levers to reduce incarceration so that we don't fill a big jail, right? And when you're looking at population growth, crime rates, and that average daily or average length of stay, I think there's still a lot of work we can do on reducing that length of stay. I know that has gone up over the last decade. The pretrial numbers have gone up over the last decade. And I think you can make the hypothesis that some of that length of stay is growing because of the complexity of the people who are in the jail who need additional behavioral health and substance use treatment. And with the decade of policies and work we've done to really try to treat those underlying causes, I think that we should be looking at scenario 4 and backing into how many beds could we afford in that scenario so that we can actually address the 50% plus who are in need of substance use treatment and behavioral health supports in our jail.
Are you looking for
I think, honestly, it would be amazing if IPRTF would be willing to support a motion to make that ask of the county to do that scenario. Scenario 4, how many beds could we afford with that level of support?
So, can I make a comment to clarify a few things before we do?
Yes.
Cool. So, thank you for that. I do have the 2019 document. So does our design build team. So one thing that we are doing right now, and we plan to come with you once we have the final results. So one thing that jail capacity analysis was short on was further definition of what those special housing units were. And without further breakdown and analysis of those special housing units, we really needed that in order to get more programming done for this jail. And so we have brought on a statistician to look at some more data that's become available that Eric Ratz with DLZ, who did that initial study, did not have access to. And so we have some better data around that, as well as some court data that's being looked at the same time. And we also now have the concept of a plan, if you were, for a diversion program. And so those are being factored in to look at sort of a refined jail capacity analysis, looking at all of those things. And so that's nearly complete as well. That's going to dovetail with that behavioral health analysis because it goes along with the BCC. So we do plan to present that to the IPRTF once it is complete. And it goes into a little bit more detail on things like, what the courts are doing, and maybe how that affects average length of stay, things like that. Once we talk about scenario 4, though, like I said, it's not necessarily all of the above. So it's going to be very difficult to say scenario 4, like what are we talking about? So, for example, I'll be brief here. So when I was talking earlier, one thing I neglected to mention, I'm still screen sharing, yes?
Yes,
Okay,
you are.
perfect. Okay, so one thing I neglected to mention was this intake and release area. So this intake and release area in scenario 1 was about 6,000 square feet. And we increased that to about 9,500 in scenario 2. And the reason we did that is because it was based on, again, about Skagit's area, a little bit less than that, because we're backing into their square footage, right? But in scenario 2, the reason we increased it was because it didn't have square footage for things like diversion triage, medical interview room, those types of things, right? It was just completely inadequate in those spaces. And so we increased that square footage to allow for those types of things. Again, we're, in some cases doubling up a little bit and then figuring in, okay, what can we do with technology, those types of things. But the spaces are there. But in scenario 1, there's no diversion triage space. There's no like interview space. It's very bare bones. In scenario 2, that space is provided so those things can happen. You have more people there in intake and release. In scenario 2, there is a rapid resource center, things like that. So in scenario 3, that space just grows, and in scenario 4, it's huge. And so the question is, when we're talking about scenario 4, what is it specifically that you're asking for? Is it specifically to housing or what? Because the warehouse grew by another 1,000 square feet. The maintenance is more than 5 times the square footage. So I think we just need to be careful about whatever motion
That's a
how
great
you word
clarifying.
things.
Yeah, I think that's a clarifying question, and perhaps the motion should be to align with the jail planning principles of 2019 to ensure robust and adequate ability to treat the underlying causes of incarceration, including substance use, treatment, and behavioral health. That whatever scenario includes the most ability for us to do that, that we understand how many beds we can afford with all of the things that come along with that. There's probably a better eloquent way. Maybe Maya, I'd welcome your friendly amendments, but I think that's fair, Adam, to clarify.
Heather, could we get to some of the other questions and then come back? Bertie, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I have a couple of separate comments. The first comment, listening to the Finance Advisory Board meeting and then to this presentation, I have heard both you, Adam, and I heard Caleb say that scenario 1 is completely inadequate and it would raise operational costs because of the transport needed back and forth from the residential part to all the other areas. So I would propose that we completely remove scenario 1 from consideration and future presentations, because I think it misleads us a little bit to think, oh, well, look, there is a really affordable model, when I think there's agreement that that is not an option. So that's my first comment. The second comment is in line with what both Heather and Maya are saying. I appreciate the reason for fixing the number of beds in order to compare apples and apples across all these scenarios. I'm also beginning to hear that the scenarios that we gravitate to the most, 3 and 4, may be totally unaffordable. And I think then we have to take a step back, as Heather said, to the 2019 fundamental operating assumptions and remove ourselves from a fixed number of beds and instead say, if we provided the design of a jail that matches those fundamental principles that we declared was important and that led the population of Whatcom County to vote for the ordinance, how many beds could we afford? And I think that I appreciate the short timeline, and I know Satpal said every week costs us more money, but this is absolutely the most important decision we are going to make for a long time around our justice system, and we need to do it thoughtfully and correctly. So I would be willing to make a motion that the IPRTF recommend that a scenario be developed that includes the principles of jail design as outlined in 2019, that compares the affordability of the 480 beds with affordability of fewer beds in order to still meet those principles. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm going to step in
Jill, I
for
see
1
that
second.
you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do we have a motion on the floor already from Heather?
I'm happy to retract my motion and second Verdi's.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd like to get through
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4 questions here, and then
Five.
let's 5.
And let's take the time to do it. Yeah.
So Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. We talked a lot about budget. There's a group working on the budget, and I'm going to tip to Jed. Maybe you can outline, Jed, the total capital cost available and what it takes to get to that total capital cost, so that we can talk with some bookends here. Jed, do you have that information?
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about this. And we've been having discussions looking at the numbers and looking at conversations with our bond analyst. And right now we're taking in around, like, altogether about $12.5 million. When the city's 25% is taken out of that, that's closer to $11.5 million. And when we look at our total ability to borrow on that limits that kind of starts to create what we call a cap on, the size of the jail. And if we take some assumptions about sales tax growth, about the interest rates that we'll get, it looks like the ceiling, if we're just relying on this source, is around $230 million. So there's some assumptions baked into that. And we'll have to test those out with our partners, and it includes the cities being willing to contribute for longer. But that looks like a pretty firm upper limit. But it also still has to be negotiated. And the assumptions that are in there are ones that we'll have to walk through with all the partners of the interlocal agreement.
And I guess remind me what happens to the 50-50 split for behavioral health and for capital costs?
So we've looked at a scenario, and this is not one that's being proposed. It's just kind of a draft to give us put a pin in the map. And if the cities extend their contribution at 75% until the year 2035, that would create about $230 million for construction. And then after that, there would be about around 30 to 35% potentially remaining for behavioral care programming in the community. Over time, that could change as the economy grows, but those assumptions are just assumptions, and it's if we're looking out to 2035, that's a long time from now.
And the 230 includes 20 million for the behavioral health center. Is that correct? So
I know that we have, the behavioral care center is certainly a priority, and I think we plan on building that no matter what the circumstances are. Looking to state funds is one thing we're looking toward, but it may be that we'll have to have 20 million reserved from this source to support the construction of that project. So that would essentially cap the jail cost at around $210 million if all of these other parameters are agreed upon.
All right, back over to Chief.
Thank you. A few things. It's a little concerning to me to consider any beds less than 480, and I believe that for quite a few reasons. As the highest utilizer of the jail, my agency books more people than anyone. And I know that we provided some data about folks that we believed we could book but could not because of restrictions. I don't believe that was kind of our best shot at trying to quantify that number, but that, in my opinion, is not a statistically valid sample whatsoever. It was done over 3 months. It was not done during our busiest months. And that includes little to no proactive policing because of the level of staffing. I think there was an article recently that talked about Washington State being last place. Not only are we last place today, but it got worse this year. It's actually lowered. And so when you don't have officers out there being proactive, then you're not getting the need assessment accurately. We currently have 4,495 active misdemeanor warrants in the city of Bellingham and 700 active felony warrants. And the thought of entertaining any bed count lower than 480, I don't even know if 480 is going to be enough. Our sheriff has said that 600 is the number that he needs to eliminate booking restrictions. And the reason why that's such an important thing for the safety of the community is I've got, some pretty alarming examples of crimes and victimization that have occurred as a result of booking restrictions, and that doesn't speak to the third principle of keeping our community safe. So, in my opinion, you cannot meet all three of those principles with less beds. I don't think that Skagit. I mean, if we're trying to compare apples to apples and make accurate comparisons, Skagit County has 400 beds, and their population is significantly lower than ours. In fact, their biggest city is Mount Vernon, which is 35,000 people. Bellingham has almost 100,000 people. So I think I think the right answer is in balance in the middle. And I agree. I don't think the first scenario is something we should even entertain. And I don't think the fourth scenario is something we should entertain because of the cost. So I think where I'm at is somewhere in between 2 and 3. But I'm gonna go on record as being opposed to any beds less than 480. Thank you.
Maya, please go ahead.
Thank you. And Heather, I appreciate the data or the information you provided earlier, and I would support the IPRTF asking for these assessments. But what I guess I'd like to know from county leadership is, because I'm not on the FAB, I don't know who actually needs to ask for this to be done, and will this happen before the April deadline? I mean, I think it's great if IPRTF asks for it, but I just don't know that that has any real weight, and I want to know who actually needs to ask.
I can answer that. I mean, we're just doing it right now already. So the direction that we really are taking is to start with scenario 2 as our baseline. We're not looking at scenario 1 anymore. And when I say scenario 2 as our baseline, I mean all of the things in here, because all of these things are really important. Can't run a jail without a kitchen, laundry, warehouse, staff support, admin. And so when I mean scenario 2, I mean the whole thing that you have here as sort of a baseline, and then move things right or left, less or more, to try to make different things work in with that scenario, if that makes sense. So that means more or less housing configurations. It may mean more or less healthcare, hopefully more healthcare. What we have now, we would like to improve upon for sure. And it's about trying to be very creative with the budget that we have, knowing that we have X amount of square feet that we could fit into this, and every square foot is a cost. And so trying to be really judicious about this, knowing that we're also at a programming level. And one of the things is looking at less beds and you know different of the sort of scenario 4 type of bed housing units, different makeups of housing units, what those might look like, some bunked, some single units, because it's not bad that some of the units are bunked. There's a portion of the folks that come into the jail that are there for 1 or 2 days, right? And so we don't need maximum security for the folks that are, some of the folks that are there for 70 days. Some folks are there for 1 or 2 days. And so having that mix of different housing units based on the data that we have available is going to make a lot of sense. And it's just finding what that mix is. And so that's our work ahead of us for the next several weeks. But now that we have a fixed variable of cost, we can, figure out what some of these things look like.
Can you tell us where and when that will be presented?
Both at the March and April Fab, we anticipate. It just depends on how quickly we can make this happen. I'm not going to promise that we can have that at the March Fab today. We're aiming for that, but I don't know how quick we can make that happen.
All right, Sheriff Kingsley.
Yes, thanks. This has been a really interesting conversation. So I do want to go on record again, as I have over a year ago. I believe the reason why we need 600 beds is because when we look at the analysis from DLZ, and then there's a new analysis that's coming out, what we should be looking at is 2050, 2040, not just today. And with the population growth of Whatcom County, with the population growth of Bellingham and all other cities, the fact of the matter is that with more people comes more crime. But also, with more crime means that we need more supportive services within the jail. It also means that we absolutely need the behavioral care center. So when you look at 480 beds, I agree with Chief Mertzik, and in fact, I agree with a lot of you. And if you go back to the matrix that Adam put up earlier, that right there. I've been in certain meetings where people have asked me, well, Sheriff, what is your priority? Because we need to prioritize this. And I went on record and said that I'm not going to prioritize any of those things because we need them all. We need all of them. So, how we meet in the middle between 2 and 3, I don't think that we'll get to 4. I think we need 600 beds. I don't think we'll get to 600 beds.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm here to say that it's going to cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where we made the mistake at is when we actually approved this as a community, we thought that we were approving enough money, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not enough money.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, how do we get there? And if we can't get there, we're going to have to sacrifice some of these things on this chart, which would break my heart. But some choices has to be made if we cannot get the money.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Dan, go ahead. And Bertie, would you put down your hand and please?
Oh, I apologize. Yes, definitely.
Daniel Hamill.
Yeah, Bertie, I think your mic's still on, by the way, too. That matters. Yeah, so just real quick here, one on any motion or any direction moving forward, I would want to have a better understanding on the impacts of the interlocal agreement with the city of Bellingham in particular, or just downstream impacts on what that looks like. At the FAB meeting that was referenced, it was about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago. It was very clear that scenario one was completely off the table. That was done for illustrative purposes when it comes to working within a budget. Scenario one, I would regard that as a monument to the past, and I don't think that there's any interest in, from what I've heard, in going in that direction. Scenario three was the one that seemed to have the most gravity and traction. However, there were several things or several components that we're all looking at here on the screen that some would have to be either scaled back quite a bit or eliminated completely. And I think that was one of the takeaways that I had from the FAB was what are you willing to live without? And scenario three was sort of the one that had the most potential, I guess. And scenario four just seemed like outlandishly expensive. So so just going back and Ted or Jed, rather, you touched on several of these components and Mayor Cortez as well when it comes to, well, how does this impact cities? So I'd want to have that just very clearly outlined and articulated moving forward.
All right, thank you, Dan. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I want to speak against the motion. I just think 480 is a minimum. I agree with Tank that we probably need more as we look to 2050. But as a general answer to how many, I just do the math of 210 is what we have to spend. 350 is scenario four. That's 210 is 60% of the money. So just assume it's square footage, 60% of the people, that's 288. So the answer to Heather's question is a jail of under 300 if you're going to go with scenario four. Just ballparking without making our consultants go through a lot of work. And that's why I would speak against the motion. What does it take? Because it's going to be a number that's probably unacceptable, probably smaller than the current capacity.
Thank you, Scott. Heather, go ahead.
I think that I'm not sure what meeting the discussion will end up at, but number of beds is one thing, but type of beds and availability of the treatment is the other thing. And so if it's 300, or just based on the jail capacity analysis from last summer, the numbers of estimates and what I've seen in our Cascadia Daily report is actually higher. The number of people in our jail who have need for substance use treatment and need for behavioral health supports and treatment. If all of those beds have the ability to have that kind of treatment, then I think that's a different conversation than if they're just the typical, as Dan says, monument to the past, right? Of we're going to warehouse people. We're going to book people in, they're going to stay a few days, they're going to leave, and they're going to probably recidivate because they did not receive any support or help inside the jail that would help them be on a different path. And so I don't know where that conversation is, where you get to those details. Is that going to be at FAB? Is that at the internal joint advisory work group that that most of us don't get to be at? And so that's why I think it's good for us to take the time here in one of the public forums we can. Otherwise, it has to be at county council, I think. So, if that, I'd like to know where that conversation is going to be about what type of beds and what exactly kind of treatment for what capacity of the jail, when it's likely 70% of the people in our jail need that support and treatment right now at a minimum, right? If that's 480 beds and we can provide all of that care, okay, that's a different conversation. A few things though I wanted to also just put out there. Chief Mertzig, you mentioned the proactive policing, not being able to do that, and the active warrants. I captured about 700 felony and 4,000 something misdemeanor active warrants, and those being part of the pressure behind not wanting booking restrictions and not having that tool as our front line of care in a lot of places, right? As our police force. And I'd love to better understand what kinds of charges those warrants are. When I did I did an analysis in 2023 of all the jail bookings, and the top warrants at that time were driving with a suspended license in the 3rd degree and a failure to appear for that court date, assault 4, failure to appear for assault 4, DUIs, failure to appear for theft, and then possession of a controlled substance. And I think that like taking the time to understand what are the active warrants, what degree of public safety risk do they have, and are there other ways that we can case manage or process through those warrants that don't have to be a jail booking and take a jail bed. And I know shoplifting, for example, has been a significant issue, right? The businesses have, like downtown, we all want to address that, and that proactive policing, what I've read, is actually way more effective than the jail booking, the swift response. And so thinking about, okay, overall budget, if we have $1.6 billion we're going to spend in the next 50 years, can we reallocate some of those dollars to proactive policing instead of to jail beds, right? And then, Sheriff, you mentioned that population growth and that, 600 beds for the 2050 numbers. And that's kind of a linear formula, but we also need to take into account, as you do, what's our average daily population and what's our length of stay and what can we control, and the crime rates associated with the population growth. And what I'm reading and seeing is that crime rates actually nationally are going down. I know there's variable seasons, but they're trending down, and they've been trending down in Whatcom County too. The Washington State University report on the Vera update a couple years ago said Whatcom County crime rates are trending down. Our average daily population has been about 300 for the last decade, even with population growth. It ballooned up, but it also went way down. Average has been 300. And that length of stay, I think, is a significant area of reform work that we can do with the courts, with the case processing, with support for public defenders and prosecutors, and helping people get through the system. Because length of stay right now, with a 90% pretrial, that means they're in there before even their sentence, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, still. And then Dan, the interlocal, does it have to be opened regardless? Because at this point, the county is going to need more of the city's dollars for a longer period of time. And if the booking restrictions requirement is a part of that, I would request that it's just defined then. What are we even defining? Because my understanding is that the current policy is that the only things that really can't be booked when it's in yellow and red are warrants and DOC cases, but that anything that is like the moment a crime is happening, at least the way I read it, and tell me if I'm reading it wrong, but if a crime is happening, they can be booked, but it's warrants and DOC, which I don't know a lot about how DOC works, but so that's what I'd offer.
Kayla, why don't you go ahead and Chief Mertz, did you just raise your hand?
I did. I wanted to address that
Okay.
restriction provision, but I can wait too.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Chief.
Yeah, so that is not the case when the jail is in the red. Things like burglary in the 2nd degree, so someone can come into your home and take your things. We could not book on that. Indecent exposure, residential
burglary in the 2nd degree isn't residential burglary.
I know. I'm adding both of those. Sorry, residential burglary and burglary 2nd degree both apply. Assault in the 4th degree, taking a motor vehicle without permission, malicious mischief in the 1st degree. There's many things that harm our community that would not be able to be booked.
Kayla, go ahead.
Sure. I just wanted to address Heather's question or folks' questions about sort of like where can we talk about what type of beds and where's that policy conversation. So we have our consultants nearly complete on a sort of refined jail capacity analysis that has some of the data that I think folks are interested in discussing. We're happy to bring that to a public forum, to our advisory boards, and we can talk about what that looks like. And along with that study will be recommendations on specialized housing. So the type of beds that we need for different folks in the jail. So Adam can talk a little bit more about that. But I think that is when you're talking about, well, what type of beds, what is the quality, square footage, level of service of those beds? I think that's where you're going to see those recommendations. And then the other thing I just wanted to say to like try to get a little bit of direction from this group over the next couple of months is I hear a lot about like, well, we want every single person in this jail to have access to treatment services. Like that's the impression I'm getting from this conversation. And I think that's a great ideal. But what you'll see from the data is that the median length of stay in our jail is 2 days. So less than 50% of the people in our jail are 50% of the people in our jail are there for 2 days or less. And so what type of bed, what type of treatment do you expect them to have access to? And how is that prioritized over community-based treatment from sort of like a progressive policy perspective that I think a lot of the members of this group have? I think your direction, your feedback, your guidance on that is helpful once you take a look at this data.
I'm a little concerned about the April deadline, and we are running out of time. We've got a couple other things on the agenda. We can minimize those to have this important conversation. But would you remind us what is the deadline? And let's see, we are in the February meeting. We have a March meeting, and then there's an April deadline. So I just want to make sure that IPRTF has the time and space to fully vet these questions. So my question to you, Heather, as my co-chair, where do you want to go from here in this conversation today?
I appreciate the time and the ability to have the discussion. I have one more question, and then if there's any other questions, Chief Mertzig, that is really helpful to understand. I think those are, when I read through it, those are the types of misdemeanors that can't be booked when the jail is in red. And obviously not all of us want to be able to address those public safety issues. And so I would love to see if we could define booking restrictions in that interlocal as the constraint, right? Or as a driver in this discussion. That those kinds of bookings have to be bookable, and that the warrants maybe, I mean, it'd be great. Yes, we want to help people get through the system, but those misdemeanor moments, yes, I think, and that's what I'm saying. If you just leave it vague as there can't be any booking restrictions, you could also read that as all 5,000 active warrants need to be able to be booked day one. And that's obviously not what we're talking about either, right? So having some definition around what do we mean by no booking restrictions, I think is a valuable conversation, whether it's a policy conversation or a City of Bellingham conversation or whatever that needs to be. So thank you for sharing that helpful information.
We have a motion on the table, and I want to just be sensitive to our doing our business as well. Scott, go ahead, and then we should return to the motion.
Yeah, just 2 quick comments on, first of all, length of stay, 2 days. It's just a story from Linden, but we had a guy that robbed a convenience store, broke the front door to get in. We took him to jail. He was released within that day or whatever. The next day he was back, went and stole the same thing and broke the other front door in the process. So the citizens of Linden would like the stay to be longer than 1 day in certain circumstances. So that's why we would advocate for more beds. Also, what does it cost to delay? Okay, it's a $200 million project, 4% a year. That's $666,000 a month. So if you delay the project a month Every month you delay it, it's over $500,000 you can't spend on the facility. You're just spending it on inflation. So that's why there's such a push to get things done quickly, because a 2-month delay is $1 million less we can spend on the facility. That's just the reality of inflation. So,
Mayor Cortez,
yeah.
I think though that story about people getting released is really important. And I don't know for sure, but I don't think people are released because there aren't enough jail beds. It's often because they got bail or because the sentencing guidelines show that people don't stay in jail for. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that, Scott. That was an unfortunate situation. That was a judicial decision at first appearance. And Heather, sorry, but the judges do think about jail, how much space they have within the jail when they make those decisions. So it's an unfortunate thing, but that did happen.
But it's not the only factor.
No, it's not the only factor, but it was one of the factors, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm sure I know they think about those things.
I would love to watch the video of that hearing because I don't think a judge would articulate that jail space is a basis for a bail decision. That's not part of the rule, and that isn't part of what they're supposed to weigh when setting bail. They're supposed to look at community safety, return to court. Jail capacity is not a factor they're supposed to consider, and if a judicial officer did, I'd be curious to see them put that on the record.
No. I'm sure that was not articulated, but they do think about that. I've seen that happen.
Okay, I'd like to return to the motion, and I believe that was Bertie's motion. Where are we with that?
Jill.
Thank you. When everyone is ready, Bertie, if you could restate your motion, and then I think it would be important to do a roll call vote for this, please.
I think what I would have to say based upon the discussion, the motion specifically was asking to reevaluate the scenarios to see if we designed the jail we wanted, how many beds could we accommodate under the budget. And listening to the discussion, I think I'm willing to retract that motion. And the real issue, I think, is the need for solid public input on such an important decision. And I do appreciate what Mayor Cortez says about the cost of delays. At the same time, the jail got voted down a number of times because the majority of Whatcom County voters really wanted a different approach. And I think if we rush this through without having enough time, even for the IPRTF, to feel like we have weighed the options and made a recommendation. Yes, we can do that, but I think it will backfire in public sentiment, public support, and future needs for public support for increased finances, et cetera. So my argument is I think this needs to come back to the IPRTF for very careful consideration once these things are done and not just live in the FAB and JAWS. And I think I will withdraw the motion, but I think the principle that you need to include the public IPRTF meeting at a minimum prior to a final decision. And as Peter said, we have March. And so I would argue that the deadline be extended perhaps till the end of April so that IPRTF can weigh this 2 more times. And I don't think a motion will do any good. So that's a recommendation and a plea.
So you're withdrawing your motion. Is that correct? Kayla, would you like to, or somebody from your office like to speak to Paul? Please go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I have a couple of very brief comments, and first thing is that which I stated in the FAB meeting also, that the county executive is charged with build the project with the budget given to the executive's office and on schedule. I think that is my concern and my responsibility And that's why I bring up these things of decision making. Second thing I want to show that I've been involved with this process from 2015 to all the way, the listening session, all this, and the negotiations, first levy, second levy, all this. So what has happened that what we as a community planned was a good thing. And we all wanted with our best wishes to be able to achieve that. But the situation has drastically changed in 3 or 4 years. Normal inflation, 2-3% a year, okay, 5% once in a while, but this is totally wild that what cost has done to us. And this is the decision that we all have to take. Nobody's going to come to us, say, hey, I have an idea, this is what you should do. All the people who have to decide are in this meeting, or few more people. Ultimately, council has to decide. So I would request everybody come to grips with what our pocket allows. And within that, it's a very healthy discussion that scenario 1, 2, 3, 4, we have a la carte on the table. We don't have to say, let's take scenario 3 and take all the things in 3, or scenario 1. Or I think this is a variety of things available to us. What we need to do is prioritize. We talked about that, and pick certain features which we all want, and then include those. And some features we can give away, do that. So my request to the FAB meeting was that I was confronted that way, what is your solution? I said, my solution is when anybody comes to these meetings over next 2 months, please come up with what you are willing to give, not what you are willing to take. That spirit of all of our community will be only way we can solve this conundrum. This is not brought out by one or something out of our control. So my request is, please consider it. Please consider it in a way, what is the best for our community on the long term, and affordability. How we match those things is our key. Thank you.
Sat Paul, so what I'm hearing from you, among other things, is that we need to stay within the April deadline. I'm just trying to get an idea of whether we have one more meeting to discuss or 2 more meetings to discuss.
I'm going to add, sorry, that this is such an important topic. Having extra meetings should not be ignored. Time window is important. If we have to have 2 meetings every 2 weeks, or once in a while in a week, we should make strides to be able to accommodate, but let's not push the date line and then another date line. I think we already, look, it is March 2026. Levy passed 2023, say January 2024, right? So, okay, that's it. I think
very good. So it sounds to me like we need to have perhaps consider a interim meeting. Yeah, an extra meeting. So
maybe it could be in person.
That would probably be a great idea. All right. Well, your co-chairs will be working on this, and so if we may, in this part, I'm going to kick my data proposal to the next meeting, and because that's going to take more time than we have, I want to make sure that we get to the public comment. In fact, what I'd like to do is call for public comment now and take up whatever time we have with the rest of the agenda. I see that there are attendees. Would you raise your hand if you would like to take 3 minutes to tell us what's on your mind? Anyone from our online attendees? Okay, and it's just the normal crowd here in the conference room, so no members of the public here, Jill. All right. What was that?
You want to do table?
Well, okay.
Tee it up.
All right. Okay. Sounds good.
The other item we have up for a potential vote today, if the task force feels comfortable moving forward, is a proposal that Peter's been working on around a data coordination work group. I see this as many months of conversation about the need for data, some of which was surfaced even today in these decisions that we have before us. And this opens up more of a formal sort of public process for deeper engagement to coordinate some of the data. So I think Peter has prepared a written motion that I believe was in the packet. And if Jill, if you're able to pull that up for Peter to talk through, and if the task force is comfortable voting to move forward, we'll entertain that motion after any discussion.
Great. So what was in the packet was the full proposal, and I hope that you read it. I know that it can be hard to get to all the things that are in one's packet. So what I've done is I've written a rather long motion that pretty much has all the top level elements in it. So you know exactly what you'd be voting on. So I'm going to read that motion now. I move that the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force authorize the formation of a Justice Project Data Coordination Work Group under IPRTF authority as a focused, time-bounded effort structured as 6 meetings over approximately 3-month period to align cross-system data work across criminal justice and behavioral health. The work group shall establish and maintain shared system definitions and priority indicators consistent with the Village Reach Evaluation and Performance Measurement Plan, including measures such as jail bookings, admissions, average and pre-trial length of stay, diversion, case resolution rates, connections to care following release, recidivism and rearrest indicators, selected population level health and safety metrics, and disaggregated measures necessary to assess racial disparities and inequities across the system. The work group shall coordinate and stabilize existing analytical foundations, including the Justice Project interim data dashboard, and align related efforts across IPRTF, Index, JPOP, behavioral health, legal and justice committees, and the Racial Equity Commission and other relevant bodies so that the system measurement reinforces shared definitions and equity analysis and fiscal accountability rather than diverges. The work group shall define a target operating model and phased implementation pathways for an integrated cross-system decision support framework, including governance, structure, role-based data access, privacy and legal guardrails, and priority decision use cases with policy authority and ownership remaining with the county. Limited consultant support may be utilized to assist with documentation synthesis of definitions and dashboards and preparation of written and presentation materials while deliberation, decision-making, and public presentation remain the responsibility of the work group members. The work group shall return to the IPRTF with a shared definitional catalog, coordinated baseline, equity-informed measurement framework, and recommendations for phased implementation to strengthen fiscal accountability, transparency, and evidence-based decision-making across the justice and behavioral health system. Sorry.
Second that.
Okay, we got a second? Discussion? Dan, please go ahead.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth paragraph, first, well, I guess there's only one sentence. Can you just define integrated cross-system decision support framework and what that means? I mean, you've got it sort of defined, but I just want a little bit drill into it.
Sure, you bet. And I would encourage you to go back to the full proposal, and I will be happy to share. I share other documents that would get to this, but right now what we have, Dan, is legacy databases that are very difficult for us to get data from. And what we'd be working on is a system using new technologies that would draw data from these legacy databases, allowing us to, depending on what role we play, whether it is Eric Ritchie's office, whether it's a citizen like Heather and myself, or whether it's Chief Mertzig, to this is the role-based part of it, to access and query against the data as long as it's allowed, by HIPAA and CGIS to be able to use that, query against that information, and making decisions with that good data. This would be live data, and it would be growing as we had greater integrations with the constellation available to us. Does that answer your question, Dan? And happy to take it offline with more support.
No, I think that's getting to what I was trying to figure out with where you were going with this, but no, that answers the question. Thank you.
Okay, Brady.
Yes, I'm think that the concept of developing a data work group to try to pull all the fragmented discussions that are happening is a good one. I'm supportive of it. I think that the ownership and membership of it are important as well. And so I would encourage you to heavily involve JPOP because they are charged with overseeing the data of this project, and also make sure that we include REC, because the Whatcom Racial Equity Commission has done some work on the justice system data, and I think their input will be valuable.
Thank you. Dan, do you have another question, or is your hand just still
Yeah,
up?
it's just a quick follow-up question. So I'm just trying to get this straight in my thinking here. So you're talking about these disparate systems that don't currently talk to one another, or if they do, they don't do very well at it. And so I'm trying to just understand, you have some kind of methodology that will enable these systems to then communicate, and then we can query against the data, as you put it. And the systems that correct me if I'm wrong here, like I hear a number of different systems like Spillman and Gelada and Longarm and the National Crime Stats folks. Are those some of the systems? Are there others? And how do you propose to integrate these together?
At this time, I cannot dive into how it would be. I would propose to do that. Just that this work group, needs to address what this model, what is possible in this model, and it is project 3 of our implementation plan. Requires us to, and the work from Village Reach requires us to do the work to understand what it is that we can and we cannot do. And Eric, did you have something?
Yeah, Dan, I think asked the question I was going to ask, but I also wanted to say that I support the idea of more data and figuring out what the data really means from all the systems and bringing all that together is very important. I was going to ask the same question. Gee, do we know what we're going to do and how we're going to do that? But bottom line is we need somebody to help us figure that out. Say that. So that's why I support this.
Very good. Are we ready to take a vote? All right. All in favor of the proposal?
If everyone could turn on your video and raise your hands according to your votes.
I have a question before the vote.
Oh, all right. Chief, go ahead. Or sorry, Sheriff, go ahead.
So the composition of the work group, who decides that?
That's a good question. I would like to I'd like to propose in the proposal there is a listing of people who have volunteered for a previous iteration of a discussion we had. They seemed like they were interested. I think it's important that we have all the data owners, as you know, you being one of those, plus well-represented people from our oversight committees to be represented on this work group. And does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
All right, let's go with the vote. All in favor? Jill, let us know.
Thank you. I see all hands raised. If that's not correct, let me know.
All right. Well, let's call for any votes against. Anyone voting against the motion? Arlene, is that a hand up or?
No.
Okay. All right. And any abstentions? Sounds like it passes.
Can those of
And
you in the conference room please indicate your vote? I know there's 3 of you in there, so.
Eric, Peter, and Heather all voted in the affirmative.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking your time today with the IPRTF meeting for February, and we will be getting back to you about an interim meeting. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks,